When we think about the most dangerous characters in the world of Naruto, names like Madara, Obito, or maybe Pain usually come to mind. But if we look at the story specifically through the number of lives these characters took, the list becomes much more interesting. Even Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha killed several people during their journeys, but compared to some other characters, their numbers are surprisingly small. For example, Minato Namikaze wiped out a massive number of enemy shinobi almost single-handedly during the Third Great Ninja War, effectively stopping the Hidden Stone Village's advance. And he was just one person. Today, we're looking at characters who directly or indirectly became responsible for the deaths of not dozens or even hundreds, but thousands of people. Some killed with their own hands, while others created the conditions for wars, experiments, and mass destruction. And we're starting with someone many fans are used to seeing in a completely different light. Itachi Uchiha is often remembered more as a tragic hero than a killer. But if we put his personal story aside and look only at his actions, the picture becomes much darker. Before the events of the main story, Itachi carried out missions for the root division of the Anbu under Danzo. Then came the decision that would change his life forever. Itachi wiped out almost the entire Uchiha clan, leaving only his younger brother Sasuke alive. Of course, we know why he made that decision. Itachi believed that doing so would prevent a civil war inside Konoha and protect his brother's life. But that doesn't change the basic fact. In a single night, he destroyed an entire clan. And his list of victims didn't end there. After that, Itachi joined the Akatsuki, where he continued carrying out dangerous missions and operated as a shinobi for hire. He also took part in operations outside Konoha and fought enemies from other villages, so calling Itachi simply a peaceful hero would be far too easy. He genuinely wanted peace, but he was still responsible for the deaths of a huge number of people. His story is one of the best examples of how morally complicated the shinobi world really is. Sometimes a character can kill in the name of peace, but that doesn't make the number of dead any smaller. But if Itachi at least tried to limit the scale of his actions, the next character didn't see killing as anything unusual. Hidan is one of those characters who can hardly be described as an ordinary shinobi. After the hidden hot water village abandoned its military past and turned into a tourist destination, Hidan couldn't accept the new path his homeland had chosen. He believed that the shinobi living there had betrayed their purpose and deserved to die. As a result, Hidan killed virtually every shinobi in his own village. But he didn't stop there. Hidan followed the religion of Jashin, which didn't simply allow killing, it actively encouraged it. To him, another person's death wasn't a tragedy or a last resort, it was part of his faith. That's what made Hidan one of the most brutal members of the Akatsuki. And yet, there's an obvious question. If Hidan wiped out almost all the shinobi in his own village, can he really be considered one of the biggest killers in the Naruto world? There may be characters who took far more lives during their lifetime. Take Jiraiya, for example. At first, that might sound strange. Jiraiya is one of the most beloved characters in the franchise, a legendary Sannin and Naruto's mentor. But during his lifetime, he completed 1,839 missions, an enormous number of operations, and a significant part of his life was spent during wartime. During the Second Great Ninja War, Jiraiya fought against other villages and participated in numerous combat operations. During his final mission, he also killed a shinobi from the Hidden Rain village and captured another one, sending him back to Konoha as a prisoner. His objective was to eliminate the leader of the Akatsuki, and during that same mission, he faced several opponents. We don't know exactly how many people Jiraiya killed throughout his life, because most of his missions were never shown. But when you consider nearly 2,000 missions, his involvement in wars, and countless battles, it's obvious that his path as a shinobi was far bloodier than it might initially seem. And this brings us to another problem with the shinobi world. Sometimes a character is considered a hero simply because they fought on the side of Konoha. But if we remove the idea of us versus them, what remains are people who participated in wars and killed other shinobi. And when we're talking about someone who didn't just participate in wars, but helped create the conditions for them, it's impossible to ignore Danzo Shimura. Danzo rarely got his own hands dirty, and that's exactly why he's easy to underestimate when discussing killers. He preferred to operate from the shadows, using root, political connections, and other people's hands. Danzo saw himself as the necessary darkness of Konoha, someone willing to commit terrible acts for the sake of protecting the village. The problem is that the consequences of his decisions often went far beyond Konoha. Danzo played an important role in the events that led to the Third Great Ninja War. He manipulated people, exploited their fears and ambitions, and interfered in conflicts between villages. One of the most famous examples involves Nagato and the early Akatsuki. Danzo's actions contributed to Hanzo turning against Yahiko and his organization, which ultimately led to Yahiko's death and Nagato becoming Pain. But the consequences didn't stop with the Akatsuki. The political games surrounding the Hidden Rain village helped turn a local conflict into something much larger. Eventually, 5 great nations and numerous smaller villages were drawn into the war. And this is where one of the most important points comes in. War isn't just about the people who personally kill on the battlefield, it's also about the people who create the conditions that put thousands of others there. Danzo was exactly that kind of character. Young shinobi from Konoha were sent onto the battlefield, with some barely having graduated from the academy. They were already being forced to fight against the armies of other nations, and among the people who changed the course of the war was Minato Namikaze. He single-handedly eliminated a massive number of Hidden Stone shinobi and effectively stopped their advance. So the question of who killed the most people in Naruto can't be reduced to a simple body count. Someone like Hidan killed with his own hands. Itachi destroyed an entire clan. And someone like Danzo made decisions from the shadows that ultimately put thousands of people on the battlefield. But things get even more extreme from here. Because there are characters whose experiments and military actions may have left behind not thousands, but tens of thousands of victims. But the real race for the highest body count begins with Orochimaru and Kabuto Yakushi. Unlike many of the characters we've mentioned so far, these two didn't simply participate in wars. They spent years conducting experiments on human beings. Orochimaru created numerous hideouts and laboratories where prisoners were held and used for his research. In one of those hideouts, 118 people were found after he left, all of them being prepared specifically for experiments. And that's just one known case. How many people passed through Orochimaru's other laboratories is unknown. It could have been hundreds, or possibly even thousands. Many of his experiments ended in death, while Orochimaru showed almost no remorse. To him, human life was simply a resource for gaining knowledge and achieving immortality. Kabuto took things even further. During the Fourth Great Ninja War, he used the bodies of countless dead people to create an army through Edo Tensei. And at that point, we're no longer talking about a few dozen victims. Kabuto essentially turned the dead into weapons and sent them back onto the battlefield. But even Orochimaru and Kabuto look relatively small compared to the people who stood behind the Fourth Great Ninja War. Obito Uchiha and Madara Uchiha became 2 of the main architects of the conflict. Their actions led to a war in which the forces of the 5 great nations were finally pushed into one massive confrontation. The allied shinobi forces consisted of around 80,000 shinobi and samurai, and on the very first day, roughly half of that army was killed. But the most terrifying part is that the war itself was only one piece of their plan. Obito and Madara wanted to activate the infinite Tsukuyomi and place the entire world under an illusion. To achieve that goal, they were willing to sacrifice practically everyone. And if we count not only the people they personally killed, but everyone who died because of the conflict they created, their number of victims becomes almost impossible to calculate. Yet even they aren't the final step on this list, because behind everything was someone who had been influencing the history of the shinobi world long before Madara or Obito ever appeared. Black Zetsu is one of the most underestimated characters when it comes to the scale of his consequences. For centuries, he manipulated events throughout the shinobi world, creating conflicts and guiding people toward decisions that would eventually allow him to resurrect his mother, Kaguya Otsutsuki. And this is where the scale goes far beyond ordinary wars. Kaguya used the infinite Tsukuyomi to control practically the entire world and turned countless people into part of her plan. If she hadn't been stopped, the consequences could have affected almost every person on the planet. So when you look at the complete picture, it becomes pretty strange. Naruto and Sasuke, 2 of the main fighters in the entire story, don't even come close to some of the characters on this list when it comes to the number of deaths connected to their actions. Itachi wiped out his clan. Hidan massacred the shinobi of his own village. Orochimaru spent years conducting deadly experiments. Kabuto created an army from the dead. Obito and Madara helped start the Fourth Great Ninja War, a conflict that killed tens of thousands of people. And Black Zetsu operated across generations, slowly pushing the shinobi world toward one of the largest conflicts in its history. That's why in the world of Naruto, you can't always determine who the biggest killer is by simply counting the people they personally killed. Sometimes, a character who directly kills 10 opponents can be responsible for far more deaths than someone who fought on the battlefield every single day. Because in this world, wars rarely begin because of one person. They're created through a chain of decisions, betrayals, ambitions, and attempts to gain power. And Konoha, despite its image as the main good village, repeatedly found itself at the center of these events. So if the world of shinobi ever faces a 5th Great Ninja War, don't be surprised if, once again, its origins somehow lead back to Konoha.